Lieutenant, today's date is June 2nd, 1997, and I'm interviewing Joe Diamond. Please tell us your name and where you were born.
Okay, my name is Joseph Diamond, and I was born in a small town called Seredne, S-E-R-E-D-N-E. It's located in Czechoslovakia.
What year were you taken from your home in Czechoslovakia? How old were you?
We were taken in 1944, approximately around February, and I was 15 years old.
Okay. What was your life like before you were taken to Auschwitz so late in the war?
Okay. Well, let me start saying that how life was before World War II started, and it was a normal life, you know, family-oriented, good neighbors, and just like anywhere in the United States, until Germany came in power, and then the laws began against our people. That's where things were different. We found some of the people in town, they were avoiding us because of the propaganda that came from the German machine. Also, there were all kinds of restrictions against our people. We had curfew, so our life has completely changed suddenly. We felt like we're not part of the community.
Okay. What was your family business and what happened to it?
I see. Our family, we did mostly farming, and we owned vineyards. So we made our own wine, and we did a lot of, people came from all around the country and purchased this, and this was our business. So we had vineyards. And what happened to it, again, when the laws began against our people, they started confiscating our business. We only got 50% of the profits, and slowly they just took the business away from us because we were Jewish. It's the only crime we committed.
Okay. Where did the Germans tell you and your family that they were taking you on the trains?
We were taken with the cattle trains. They made it sound like it was only a temporary encampment while the war is on, and they were going to take us to some German farm because of the security risk. And once the war is over, I mean, everything's going to be fine and we'll be back home, you know. Of course, they were hoping that they're going to win the war. Fortunately, that's not what happened. Fortunately, that's not what happened. Yeah, go ahead.
I remember in the Holocaust Museum, it was very hard for you to be in the cattle car. Why were the memories so strong?
Yeah. Well, because this situation just actually finished everything up. I mean, it's the last time I saw my family. It's the last time I saw my mother, my brother, and my dad. And I especially remember the torture they went through in the train, not knowing where they're going, confused. So, and also that I didn't know it then, but that's the last time I saw him. So this is something that will always be in my mind as long as I live.
What sort of conditions were on the train? You said they were tortured.
Well, the conditions, there wasn't enough room. They just squeezed you real tight. There was no water. People were fainting. A lot of them died. They just couldn't handle it. And as a matter of fact, when we arrived near the city of Krakow, the train stopped only for one reason, to unload the dead. And a lot of strange things happened, like some people, typical incident happened, some Polish lady in Krakow, Poland, saw people crying, and maybe she had a soft heart, and she was approaching the train with 2 buckets of water, and it's just a little incident I always remember. And the SS, the Gestapo, kicked her out of her hands, and she says, these people don't get water, and I guess we're not human beings, you know. So all in all, it was just a brutal journey on the train.
The train took you to the camp Uzgraf.
Uzhgorod.
Uzhgorod.
No, it's hard to pronounce, even for the natives. Yeah, go ahead.
What was that like? What were the conditions in the camp?
Yeah. Well, Uzhgorod was only sort of a temporary camp until they're going to give us our final settlement. So conditions were not great, but they were not as bad. In other words, everything was primitive, you know. We were pitching tents. It was like camping in a way, but and they hardly gave us any food, but we were all, it was still tolerable, you know what I mean? It wasn't that bad, but we knew that we left our home forever and we were homeless and we didn't know where we were going, so that was mostly the big problem.
Were you still with your mother and your brother and your father at this time?
Yes, we were all together, you know, waiting for our final transport when we were going to be taken away permanently. So, like I say, it was a temporary camp, okay? There was a brick factory, and the reason they took us to a brick factory, there's all kind of space. You know, there's a room to spread out. Yeah.
After 3 weeks in that camp, where were you taken?
Okay, after 3 weeks of the camp, our name was called out, and we had to report in front of a kind of an assembly, an orderly room, and we were taken by truck, you know, all the people by truck to a railroad station. The whole trip lasted only about an hour and a half to 2 hours, I'm sorry, 3/4 of an hour to an hour, and took us to a railroad station from that camp. And the railroad station was typical European railroad station. It was real large. It was unbelievable. There was all kind of activity. There was locomotives moving. You know, there was a war condition. We also noticed there was some cattle train, you know, trains, all boxcars lined up, about 40 of them, and we didn't think much of it. We just thought possibly this could be, there's a war going on and they're probably transporting cattle. But it didn't take long to find out that these trains were for us. And we started boarding them, and that was, all it did is have a little window, it was about 2 by 4, 2 foot wide, 4 foot wide, 2 foot high, just for air. You know, that's how they transported the animals. And within a half an hour, the train started moving. And we noticed, as the train was moving, it was a beautiful Sunday afternoon. Roads were empty. We looked at that, through that little window, and we noticed the train wasn't going to Germany. It was going, because we knew the territory was going towards Poland. As you know, Germany's original policy is, the German government, they didn't want to do their messy work in their own country. They always wanted to use other countries, and of course Poland was not particularly a friendly ally of Germany, so they used whatever they can, and of course that's where we were going. But we didn't know where we were going. Just like I said, some destination unknown, possibly some German farm.
Where did they take you specifically in Poland?
Pardon me?
Where did they take you specifically in Poland?
Yeah. Well, okay, when the train arrived in Poland, like I'll continue after we were in Krakow. Krakow was not far where they were going to take us. It took another hour and a half, and we arrived at our destination. It was still dawn. Then all of a sudden the train doors opened of the cattle train, and there was a big sign in front of us. It says, "Welcome to Auschwitz, Birkenau." We never heard of Auschwitz. You know, it was hardly on the map. And there was also a very famous German saying there, written down on the bottom of it. It says in German, "Arbeit macht das Leben frei." That means work will make you free. It's a very, very popular German expression. You know, it was written by a learned man. Because I had to laugh, because that's a joke, you know. Arbeit, work will make you free. So what happened is, as the doors opened, we faced 3 Gestapos with, you know, with the boots on and the whole thing like you see them in some of the old movies. And they told us immediately, we'll have to get off the train as soon as possible, take all your belongings, kids and everybody, and line up as a queue. You know, line up and follow about maybe 600, 700 people in front of us, and we'll be interviewed. That's what he told us. We'll be interviewed, like the qualification of our work, and they'll classify you, and they also told us the reason they're doing this so we can help the homeland. See, I mean, because we're all doing this for Germany. They made us think that we're actually helping the war effort instead of, and this is how they got us in. So, you know, we want to believe only good things. So as we lined up, is that your question? You want me to continue? Yeah. What happened to us? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
As we lined up and finally, you know, on that long line, just my mom, my little brother who was 7 years old, and my mom was 39, and my dad was about 41 or 42, and I was 15. So as all of a sudden we're facing the interviewer, okay? So there's 3 SS, kind of scary looking, you know, they look big and tall. And these guys should have been fighting in the front lines, but instead of that, they were fooling around here with older people and little kids. But that's how it was. So he faced us and he immediately looked at my mom and he asked, "How old is your son?" She says, 7. Okay, he says, "The woman and the boy will go to a residential camp where, you know, they'll be just between other families, and my dad and me are going to go to a labor camp. However, we can visit them on weekends." We didn't really say a strong goodbye because we were hoping to see him. You know, you just believe what you hear. And they just left, and that's the last time we saw him. We never saw him again. It was a very sad moment, which we found out later, not the same day, that they didn't go to any residential camp. They didn't go to any family camp. They walked them actually towards the gas chamber, and they were up in flames within 2.5 hours. They were finished. They finished them off. And that little incident always will stay in my mind because the people that did the killing were not some wild cannibals. They were civilized people that write poetry, composers. They were the killers. They wrote the final solution of what they're going to do to our people. How can you forgive people that kill kids, babies? They want to distinct a nation. So this is something that will always stay with me. And to be very honest with you, I have a very hard time to forgive the German people for that, during that period. And I don't know the answer if I ever could, because there's no way that somebody can give me a solution why something like this should happen. I'm sorry, you're the...
That's okay. What was your job in Auschwitz?
So when my dad and me, they put us in under quarantine because they didn't know what they're going to do with us, and finally they separated my dad from me, and they sent him away. And they put me together between about 3,500 young guys between the ages of 14 and 17. And the reason they did this because we weren't qualified to do the real heavy manual labor, so they were trying to find us some middle-of-the-road labor. So they did put us under quarantine. While I was under quarantine, it was real brutal. I mean, they didn't give you much food. Like in the morning, I'll just give you a typical day. You had black bread and black coffee. What kid, 15 years old, likes to have black bread and black coffee? The bread was about 6 weeks old. You couldn't even bite it. Lunchtime, you had a heavy soup mixed with old vegetables and sawdust. First, we hated it, and then guess what? We ate that too. On special occasions, which was on Sunday, we got horse salami. That was a treat. So, you know, we had no vitamins, and we're getting weaker by day by day. So while we were under that quarantine, I had the opportunity to take out some of the trash. And when I got out in the area, me and another colleague, we noticed, we came out, and we've seen a very bad odor, and the whole area smoked up. The whole area near us were full of smoke. Couldn't see in front of you. I happened to notice some old prisoner that was there, and I asked him, what's all this? What's going on here? What's all this smoke and that smell? Well, we're located near a German bakery. I mean, in other words, this is the largest German bakery, he told us, that breaks bread for all those German troops on the Western Front. You know, when you're 15 years old, the guy was kidding us, you believe it. Of course, we thought we were going to be near bread, so we'll never be hungry. You know, we already have our portion in the morning. So when I came back, I told these guys, we're very lucky to be near a bakery. Except we couldn't figure out how come these bakeries had large chimneys. Of course, you realize that we were only about 600 feet away from the gas chamber, where most of our people went up in smoke. We were right there, right on top of it. So when our work began, they had roll call in the morning, and we were in a camp called D camp, and there was a C camp next to us. There were women. Then there was another camp. There were gypsies. Gypsies were also taken away and interned because the Germans wanted to have a pure race, and of course the gypsies were dark, and this is the way. So these people had to be destroyed too. A lot of them died and were killed, just like our people. So I'm sorry, I got carried away here.
That's all right. You were telling me about your work that you did in the camp.
Yeah. So our first job was we went to a field and to a masonry area. We were carrying bricks every day. You figure out 3,500 people carrying about 15 bricks apiece for about 2.5 miles every day, where footings were already laid, and we found out that we're actually bringing bricks to build another gas chamber because the one that was in action could not handle the annihilation of the burning of our people. So here I was part of it, part of helping to kill our own people.
How did you feel when you found that out?
When I found that out, I was almost suicidal here. I couldn't believe that this is what's happening, but you know, you become like a vegetable. You're hungry, you're cold, and you don't think anymore straight. You're irrational. In fact, you even forget your family. It's just survival of the fittest. And this is what they made us into. That's where they were succeeding. So as time was going on in Auschwitz, there were 3,500 of us, and this is what we were doing every day. Every day we watched trains rolling in. As we were carrying the bricks, we were only about a quarter of a mile from the trains. And we noticed, like one particular day, a train from Paris came. Beautiful people. They got off a cattle train, you know, women, kids, men, ladies that were expecting, senior citizens. They separated them just like us. They got off the train. They were all confused and bewildered. They separated them like us. They had the women separate. In other words, women that were expecting senior citizens were all put in a separate area. Kids that, like my mom, that had kids under 14 were automatically killed. They didn't want to separate a woman from a child from the mother. They didn't want to create a riot. So my mother got killed because of my brother, because he was too young to work. So this was their plan. They had to kill the mother and the kid. So as they got off the train, they were separating them. Same thing. The working people went to the left. The other ones went to the right. They were supposed to go to a family camp. Chimney started smoking within a couple of hours, and by 3 p.m., everything died down, and you could see big bundles of shoes, a big area of shoes separated real neatly, gold teeth on one side, clothes all from these people, little baby shoes all thrown over. It was all separated. real neat, and this is what, and every day, this has been happening every day while I was there. No stop. This is a fast way of killing other people. There's a lot of war casualties, but we have to make a big issue out of this because this was a direct kill, a kill of people for no reason at all, only because they believed in something else, because they believe in another God. There's only one God. So I'm sorry I get carried away, but I can't help it. All right, now. So as we watched these trains rolling in every day, and of course we were doing our job, and life became almost normal. This is our life. Then one day, it happened to be around the Jewish holidays, which is approximately around August. They told us to assemble in the main area because they were going to take about 600 of us. All of us have to assemble, and they want to choose 600 of us to send us to bricklaying school because they want to make masons out of us. Well, we got all excited, you know, in bricklaying school. Where not only do we carry bricks, but now we'll be maybe masons. But we noticed something very strange. As we're lined up, 3 very distinguished-looking officers come and they introduce themselves. One of them was Dr. Mengele. I don't know if you ever heard of Dr. Mengele, Angel of Death. He's a young man. He was in the mid-30s. He was very polite. And he's going to do the choosing of bricklaying school. That doesn't make sense, did it? Which we found out later, that wasn't bricklaying school. They were going direct. They took the weakest among us so they can make room for stronger people to come in because others trained. So they took the weakest among us, and they took them that night. These 600 that were going to bricklaying school, that night, they went to the gas chamber. They came with trucks around 12 o'clock with German shepherds. They put them on the trucks, and the chimney started smoking by 10 o'clock, 10:30. These guys are all 15, 16 years old. That particular transfer, all my buddies from my hometown were gone because they looked that bad. They didn't pick me out because I still had a little flesh on me, you know. I mean, so now they have another selection. But 2 weeks later, they had another selection, but now they couldn't fool us anymore. They said they have another selection, and we knew where the destination was. So I was standing about the 3rd row, and this Dr. Mengele goes by. He practically knew me already, and he looked me over. He looked me over like looking over some kind of a cattle, you know, when you buy cattle, like, maybe you can get some work out of this guy. No, this guy, I'm sorry, no, this guy's got to go this side. He's gone. So he picked me. He looked at me, and he still didn't pick me because there's a lot of bricks around. So I stood on bricks, so I looked tall. So, you know, you had to, like, perform. So again, they took a group of 800 that time. And these selections, I don't know if it's a coincidence, they always happened on the Jewish holidays, like somebody planned it. The first was what they call our New Year's, Rosh Hashanah, and then it was Yom Kippur. Then there was another holiday called, it had to do with our Torah. We celebrate Simchas Torah. It's just like clockwork. It was all planned out. There was only 400 of us left from 3,500. And finally, they had a selection on the 400th. At that time, I already looked like a stick. I looked like a skeleton. And Dr. Mengele now picked me to go to the gas chamber. And so, you know, when you know you're going to die, you're under shock, and they put us in a barrack. And they were bunks, about 3 rows. Well, we noticed they're all young fellas like me. They're all in the bunks waiting to be taken away that night. It's amazing what happens to you when you know you're going to die. You start changing religion. I noticed one little guy started crossing himself. He thought maybe if he becomes a Christian, maybe the God will help him. Everybody started praying, crying. Finally, they told us to line up. They want to interview us because the Red Cross is here and they need some information. Some officials from the Red Cross want some information. So we were lined up, and as my turn showed up, you know, I was all broken up and I was kind of down. And this is like a miracle. Some guy tapped me on the shoulder, and maybe I reminded him of his son, and he says, "Don't be upset, I'll save you." Now, the guy that tried to save me, he was a prisoner too. He wasn't Jewish. He was a German. He was a killer. He was in charge of us. All the killers in the jails were taken out, and they put in charge of us. This particular guy killed 2 wives. That's why he was in prison. But he was human enough to feel something for a human being. I don't know, something turned into him. And this guy saved my life. He told me to crawl up a window and jump out at midnight, which I did. And I crawled on my stomach till I got to an outhouse. As I got to the outhouse, I saw a Russian prisoner of war, and I asked him if he could hide me while all my friends are going to be taken away. He put me right into the hole of the toilet, a manhole. I stood on rods all night like this here, on 2 rods in all this mess. And I was hoping he's going to take me out the next day, which he did. And I was saved. But the rest of my friends, and they were in the same outfit, they were all gone. So now life continued out there in Auschwitz, and some of the killings stopped because they claimed that the German government got some ultimatum from the Allies. I never really found out the information, but the gas chambers stopped for a short time. It was during months of September, beginning of October. That didn't mean that anybody's free. And also, the Russian army was approaching Auschwitz. They were getting close to Birkenau. Now, the Germans didn't want to be liberated. Didn't want to be liberated by the Russians, because the Russian people have suffered and they lost families, so they were really violent when they came. They wanted to get even, so they evacuated us and from Auschwitz by train for a short period, and then we started going with the death march, and I'll explain a lot of that. So what do we have now? Go ahead.
When were you taken on the death march to Austria?
Okay, well, that was during this particular time. The German, they tried to take us into areas where the war isn't active. So first we went from Auschwitz to a place called Sachsenhausen, which is near Berlin. Then they took us from that place, and made our way to Austria. That's just like going twice the route. And once they couldn't take us by train, that's when the death march began. And on that death march, I had a couple of people from my hometown that told me to carry him. Please carry me, I can't walk anymore. I carried some guys, I dropped them, and the minute they fell, they were shot. We went through little towns, German towns. We were dying of thirst, we had no water, we were hungry. Nobody came out to help, even help an animal, but nobody came out, and believe me, nothing would have happened if they would have brought some water, but they didn't, which is another thing I'll never forget. So we went through these small towns. Everybody ignored us. Most of our people were dying on the way on the death march. For example, the biggest problem was that they had no food and they were just dropping. So we lost about 80% of the people. I would say that we had about, from 3,500, we had about 400 people left that survived. And finally arrived to a place called Gunskirchen, which is near Linz, Austria. If you ask me some questions here so I can answer, what happened?
What happened when you got back to your hometown?
Oh, I see. I'm not there yet. Okay,
Right.
I'm sorry. Just want to make sure I answer the questions.
I'm good.
Okay, so now we arrived in a small little village called after long marches, losing most of our people, a place called Gunskirchen. Kirchen means church in German. I don't know what Gunz means, but anyway, this place is very close to Linz, Germany. They put in approximately all the prisoners that were left over. You know, the war was getting close to an end, and they put them all in that place, and I was one of them. There was 40,000 of us put into that camp, and the explanation was that they're going to burn the camp with the prisoners before the Allies arrive. In that little camp, there was no room to stand, there was no room to sit, there was no food, there was no water. We were losing 15 people every minute. I look like a skeleton, filthy. I watched little incidents like some of the German soldiers that were guarding us were young guys, and a couple of fellas were tied up to the rafters with a blanket because there was no room there. Just took out his Luger and just target practicing, you know. This guy was just target practicing and just shot down a man up in the air like he was some bird. He must have written home to his family, I had a good time today, and we were, you know, shooting down birds, or, you know, I mean, and this guy looked just like the guy next door, okay? And I wish people would listen to this, that what people are capable of doing. These are the things that have been happening daily, and finally, we've heard artillery fires and a lot of noise, and we knew that the war is getting close to us. One day we noticed the Germans were gone, and we started getting out of the barracks slowly. There were guns all over the place. Everybody wanted to get to an area where they can get some food. Some people were so sick they couldn't even eat anymore. I myself was walking and between that group, and far away in the field we noticed Jeep and trucks are coming towards us, and we had the feeling that we were being liberated. As they were getting closer to us, and we noticed these were GIs, and it was the Patton's Third Army, I understand, liberated that area. And they saw us, they couldn't believe their eyes that a human being could look like that. As a matter of fact, some of these guys are from New Jersey. I mean, they were just great. When we saw these American soldiers, it was just like seeing the Messiah. They put us on the trucks and on the Jeeps, and they took us to a hospital. I had typhus fever. I was put to the hospital for a long time, and after many, many months, I ran away from the hospital because I found out there were some German doctors, and I thought, in my mind, I thought I was back in the camp. So as I ran out of the hospital, I met up with some Russian troops, and I told them where I live, and guess what? I went by truck, took about 3-4 weeks, and I finally arrived in my hometown, Czechoslovakia. They told me that my father was alive. When I got off the train, my father was waiting for me. He didn't even know who I was. That's what they did to his mind. So within 24 hours, they took him away, and we went back to our home. And it was very sad to see our home. I mean, you know, the room of my brother and my mom, it's just a terrible feeling. So I contacted my family in the United States. I didn't know exactly where they live in Buffalo, so we wrote a letter to the mayor of Buffalo. And somehow or other they seeked them out, and they, after many, many years in England, I arrived in New York. The only way I can get even is tell my story and teach and make people understand, like yourself, to be beware some radical doesn't show up, and so these things don't happen again. Life has to go on. We can't always live on miseries. We're building a family, and I hope to recapture our life. I have grandchildren now, and son and a daughter, and that's one good thing we have going, and we hope we can rebuild. I just want to leave is this, that you cannot kill other people.
Thank you for watching our interview, and we hope you learned something. And bye.
I just want to say one thing, that I'm very impressed, and you've taken this, I can just feel and see how seriously you were taking this, and I just think you're a very great individual. Life is ahead of you. Good life. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.